Hello, and thank you so much for choosing this session. So, for the parents and carers in our workforce, well-being means much more than our own well-being. It means something about the well-being of those people that we love and care for. And if they are well, then we are well. So it goes much wider. And what's happened in the last few years, as employers have lent in much more, is there's been huge innovation in this area. And I want to share a little bit of that with you today. That's a picture of what I would look like with slightly lighter hair, in case anybody's interested in that. So I'm Jennifer Liston-Smith, and I'm Head of Thought Leadership with Bright Horizons. And in case any of you don't know Bright Horizons already, we help make work and family work successfully together. And what we provide are things like backup care solutions, workplace nurseries, partnerships with community nurseries, because you may know the brand as providing 300 community nurseries. Some of you may even have used Bright Horizons Childcare. We also provide a lot of coaching for individuals and managers through the parent transition, parents networks, carers networks, events for those, and a parental leave toolkit that helps the individual and the manager through the parent transition. So a lot of different resources for making that combination of work and family a little bit smoother. So that's where we're coming from. But we do a lot of thought leadership and research, and some of that is what I'd like to share with you today. But as Phil says, research in the room is also important. So if you'd like to take part in the poll, that would be great, and we'll come back to that in a little while. One of the important studies that we carry out year on year is the Modern Families Index, and that takes place with 1,000 randomly selected parents and carers. Quite an important data set. It's been running since 2012. And this year's 2022 findings were the tremendous flight risk that we're well aware of now. 38% of people, so nearly 4 in 10, were considering leaving within the next 12 months from their employer. There was a huge interest in flexibility. So 69%, when asked, were interested in some kind of flexibility of location to work. But 79%, so nearly 8 in 10, interested in flexibility of time. So time trumps place in terms of that autonomy that Eliza Philby was talking about earlier. So that's a real desire of working parents and carers. Family first. In the next slide, you can see this is people who are saying childcare and care arrangements would be a concern prior to accepting a new job or a promotion. What we've got there, the dark blue bar at the beginning, is last year's result. So 71% were concerned last year, 74%, so nearly 3/4, concerned about their childcare arrangements prior to considering a new job. And when we asked about eldercare concerns, adult care, for those who had those commitments, it was a little bit higher, even just over 75%. So those are the blue and the yellow are the whole population for last year and this year. The two green ones are men. So 69% of men last year had those concerns when accepting a new job or promotion. This year, it's climbed to 74%. So relatively, that's a 7% increase, even though it's a 5 percentage point. And women, 73% jumped to 75% having those concerns before accepting a new role. One of the other things that the Modern Families Index shone a light on, and it's no surprise if, like me, you've had children going through exams recently, educational concerns, those gaps in learning, those difficult to navigate times that our youngsters have had, whether they're really little and they've been, trying to contain themselves at home during lockdown, or whether they're older and they're sitting public exams. Those concerns were present for over half of the working parents and carers in that study, and they went across things like mental health as well as the actual educational catch-up concerns. Interestingly, 62% of men in the survey had those educational catch-up concerns, 47% of women. So it's not a gendered concern or issue. It very much these days is all genders are concerned. If you're a parent, you're concerned. The other really important piece of research that we do year on year is the Work and Family Snapshot, and that's research with the employees of our client organisations. Bright Horizons globally works with 1,300 leading employers. In the UK, we work with over 420. And so we have a really good pool of people to survey, working professionals who in this case, 1,500 of them responded. And this is the data from the 18 to 34-year-olds. When asked, a range of statements, do any of the following apply? And they were quite open-ended, quite broad. 67% said that family is now a higher priority than it used to be. 39%, so nearly 4 in 10, said that career is a higher priority. So it's the real having it all wish among that rising generation. But in the whole population of the survey, all ages, last year, 48% said that family was now a higher priority. This year, 58% of that whole survey population said family is a higher priority. So again, drawing on what Eliza Philby brought in the keynote, she asked, we had a chance to think about whether we want those water cooler moments with our work colleagues or with our family, and most people want both. So this is pretty important insight into what's going on in the minds of those individuals with family commitments. And this is really quite striking. 53% of the overall survey population were having a rethink. I find myself thinking more about my future direction and purpose. And that increased with age, as you can see there. So we know, don't we, about the great retirement in addition to the great reset or resignation. And that's where people are having a bit of a think, is this what I want to be doing with my time? And do I want to be doing it with this employer? And across all ages, you may be aware Deloitte's 11th Gen Z and Millennial study came out quite recently. And there were all sorts of things concerning the younger generations in there, including cost of living, but also social purpose and impact with the employer. And so that's, I would say, an alarm call to us as employers to make sure that for all generations, we're demonstrating and offering a sense of purpose at work that keeps people engaged when that rethink's going on. Let's have a look at the poll results to see where you're voting on what's important. So will the app stand up? Have you all voted? Have you had a chance? Let's have a look what it says. Okay, so winning at the moment in terms of concerns that you see amongst your parents are parents' own well-being and work-life fit. That's really interesting. But cost of living is closely behind, and the children's mental health and well-being is up there, along with potentially for some the educational development gaps. Really interesting insight. Thank you very much for sharing. And I can see it's mounting now. We've drawn attention to it. Cost of living is there, but followed by the parents' own well-being. So thank you for that. So let's have a look briefly at some of those different areas. In terms of the parents' own well-being, what we know from the ongoing research, as well as our day-to-day experience with parents and carers, is flexibility is up there, and as we saw, that's one of the greatest desires. And also management capability, a knowledgeable, empathic manager is crucial. And usually, as we now know, after getting used to hybrid working a bit, that often means the capability to understand that the person is there to deliver their deliverables rather than to sit and be present in a certain place for a certain time. So it's about managers stepping up into what is actually a more flexible and skillful mode of management, but it's about trusting people to deliver once the objectives are agreed. And increasingly, I don't know if you found this, but a lot of people now as parents feel more free to put their hand up and say, well, I'm just going for the school drop-off if they're working from home, school pickup, or school drop-off on a given day, and then they come back and they resume. And trusting that people get things done is a key skill. But also networks. If you do nothing else, then a parents' network or a carers' network or a family's network makes a huge impact culturally. An employee resource group, it can have a voice in the business to show what's needed, but it gives that sense of affinity and identity and a huge possibility of exchanging insights. And backup care, which I'll come back to in a moment. In terms of networks, we've done all sorts of topics during the pandemic, obviously the school-free world and getting back into routines when people started returning to the place of work. But there are evergreen topics too, such as praise and reward, or things like positive parenting, building resilient children. If you want to attract a lot of working dads, apparently raising smart children is a key topic. So that's a good one to bear in mind. And coming back to backup care, when Hill Dickinson, the international law firm, launched backup care recently, they very much pinned it to well-being, which is not that surprising because in the Work and Family Snapshot, 87% of those employees said that using backup care enhanced their well-being. It also enhanced productivity, loyalty, and many other goods. But that, for Hill Dickinson, that was paired with a platform which provides speak to an expert facility and our webinars and so on. So it's providing something of that network as well and advice. So it's about backup care, which is kind of care that's in place within 30 minutes to 2 hours when care otherwise falls over, which happens outside of a pandemic about 8 to 10 times a year, if you're parents and carers, you know this. So it's about that practical provision, but it's also about providing the advice and the networks around it. One of our NHS clients, Chelsea and Westminster, very much saw it as, so backup care as a staff retention tool that's more than paying for itself, both in retention and in absence management, because people are able to be at work when care had otherwise fallen over. So in terms of well-being, it's very much taking the stress away for the individual, but for us as employers, it's meaning that we can have people in the place that we need them to be, free from the stress and distraction. So it's a win-win. When MSc Saatchi launched backup care, they actually took the route of describing it more down the inclusion pathway. So yes, it's supporting well-being, but if we want to be a truly inclusive employer, that means representation of all groups of people at all levels. So we want hands-on working parents, male, female, any gender, all through the organisation, and we therefore need to fix some of the things that go wrong in a day-to-day life in order to achieve that. And they also, I thought this was wonderful, decided to pair that with saying we're going to make our bank holidays more inclusive. So 2 of the bank holidays you can choose to celebrate whenever you would like, because not everybody wants to celebrate the traditional Christian festivals that many bank holidays are tied to, not all of them, but many of them. So therefore you can make your own bank holiday to celebrate. I thought that was a lovely touch. So parents' own well-being we've touched upon. The educational catch-up concerns which were there for some of you, and the children's well-being concerns. A couple of interesting things that we've found, and we've found employers really innovating hand in hand with us over. One of them is virtual tutoring. So there was a McKinsey global study just earlier this year, which was looking at the gaps that young people had across all of the different nations of the world. And in Europe and North America, they reckoned that young people were about 4 months behind on average following all of the lockdowns. The Department for Education here in the UK, at the end of the autumn term just been, reckoned that secondary school children were about 2.4 months behind. So whoever we are, and that's more with disadvantaged children, the groups that have had less access to support and equipment and, Wi-Fi and so on are even further behind. So there are gaps there, and that's a known stressor for parents. And actually, many of our clients, one of the things they've done, which I think is incredibly remarkable, backup care, as I mentioned earlier, is traditionally a tool that enables people to be present when their care has broken down on a given day. Actually, many best employers have now made backup care something you can convert into virtual tutoring. So that takes backup care into the well-being space. That's not about pure presence, it's about being reassured, and with the cost of living coming high on the poll, not having to spend one's own resources to get that tutoring, but to be able to get it funded by the employer through the subsidised backup care. So it's age 4 upwards to now including GCSE, and this has been done by a range of sectors in finance, Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, law firms, Baker McKenzie, Freshfields, Accenture, Bloomberg in the consultancy field, Legal and General Mills. So it's very widespread, employers saying, look, we believe that these people need this encouragement and this support, so we're making backup care into a tool for that. And one of the other things that's been demonstrated is children being in a care setting, an early years care setting, redresses some of those gaps that have occurred during the pandemic. So there's some measurable research which My colleague Oliver is here. I think Naz is somewhere in the room as well from our stand. We can help you get hold of that research if you need to. I can certainly point them in the direction if needed, but Oliver and Naz can too. And that's shown that the children's well-being increases with a well-being-centred curriculum. And that's really important in terms of the cost of living as well, because, these slides have, I don't know if we've got time to read them, but they're kind of encouraging. So in terms of the cost of living, one of the really interesting things that employers can do right now is, as many of us know, we can have a workplace nursery, but you can also partner with a local community nursery. So many of our employer clients are now developing a partnership with a community nursery near a place of work or near where their employees are based. And you can set up a salary sacrifice scheme for that. So there's NI savings for the employer, which makes it cost neutral. And you have to only underwrite 10% of the places in the nursery for that to qualify for the workplace nursery tax exemption scheme. So the employee then makes a tax saving 30–40%, which is really significant given the cost of living concerns. So that's something to bear in mind as an employer. How can we actually respond to the concerns parents have to the cost of living and do something like that really just takes a bit of practical setup? Any questions or thoughts?